I don't care what you look like or what you think. I don't care what you do or where you're from. All I care about is that gift hidden inside you. And all I want to do is help it come alive. Because where we're going, we're going to need a lot of heroes. For the record, 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. The point of Momentum Lab is to turn idealists into impactors by aligning your dreams and aspirations with success in every area of your life today. Momentum Lab is like a playground for your highest self. We take your dreams seriously and help you remove any blocks to realizing them. We do this through courses, virtual events, in-person events, and our signature year-long accelerator. To join our world, engage in dialogue, meet up in person, and just blow your mind, sign up at momentumlab.com. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight. And the show is about purpose. It's about living to our full potential, about contributing and expressing ourselves as an intersection of what we're here to do. And this episode is a conversation with Giuliano, one of my mentors. And it's about anger. So I was just thinking, God, how does this relate? How is this part of the purpose of the show? And I think my concept here is that in order to be our best selves and to really access the true integrality of our knowledge, if that's a word, we have to use all the tools and all the resources. And, the emotional level is one of those tools, and anger is one of those tools. So this is part of a continuing exploration of that. And there's a few different topics I get into with John. One is just how he relates to anger personally. And, John's background is as a kind of social worker, Jesuit training, that then has spent the last 40 years living in El Salvador, doing what I call Gandhian constructive work. But a big part of that was the war, the civil war in El Salvador. And he was there for most of that and participated in different ways. And so the second half of the episode, he talks about that. And, for me, John is just, I've been in love with John for many years. So every word he says is gold to me. But when he talks about those experiences in the war, of course, they're particularly moving and chilling, and they kind of bring me to the present, bring me to the focus to listen to his words with a lot of intensity, and I think they will for you as well. So another moment with John here, and as part of this, he has this organization. It's called the Tamarindo, and where I've been and lived with him at different points. And I think what we're headed to, and we didn't get there in this conversation, but we will, is trying to organize a trip sometime in the next year where I would take some people down, some friends of mine, and maybe some people who are listening to this right now, to go and experience this incredible community that John has been a part of for so long. So I just wanted to flag that as well. I'm excited about that. Okay, Giuliano.
So anger.
Yeah, what can you tell me about anger? Have you been able to use that constructively in your life?
I want to play tennis with you. I don't want to play tennis with you because, I found the conversation with Jeff really interesting, and there's certainly levels, right? Like, the tennis court, which I'm staying away from for you forever. War. And I think the anger that, leadership is riddled with conflict and anger. And there's no way around that, right? And it's just, things happen. And as I was listening to the conversation, I just jumped right in. Is this okay? But I think in the conversation, I kept thinking about, I really liked the way that the red strata, sort of understanding it that way, right? I thought that was sort of helpful. But I immediately thought about, well, what is my process? what is my process, and because anger's there, right? I mean, it comes back, it's there, and I like that he called it. I wrote it down. The juice, you know, which really evokes lots of emotion when I hear juicy and juice, and I thought that my in the leadership context, as a leader, in a community context, in a very conflicted place, certainly anger. Part of my anger is a lot of my ego, right? Very, egocentric kind of like, well, it's an offense to me. Certainly fear. I mean, sometimes we get angry because we're really afraid, and I've had those experiences. And then reacting, how do we? I think the big thing is what you do with it. I think the whole day of suppressing anger, of course, is very, very dangerous, because at some point it erupts and explodes, and a lot of people say, no, I don't get angry, or no, it's okay. No, I'm not one of those, but I know I always think about cooking, right? And I know and I think the things that I try to bring to those moments of anger, first of all, is to really not react. And usually I sit on anger. There's a 24-hour period when I'm really angry. And then I think about things like, I want to bring in things of love. And I found it interesting that was never even in the conversation last week, where does love fit in there? Empathy, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, honesty, responsibility, creativity, and sort of constructing some kind of proposal in reaction to my anger. And I think that love is as a life force is even stronger than anger, even in the most horrible situations. And I don't know, that's kind of where I wanted to begin the conversation, like, how do you bring those elements into like that moment where you just want to go. And of course, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and I think I'm the only one that's just fucked with frequency, because being the most illiterate probably of the gang, but it's like how easy to fall into that, right? How easy to fall into that. And I think that at the end, I've also realized too that that red element, or that red strata rojo, that rojo is it is important because it makes us consider other ways, right? And one also realizes that at some point, you dialogue,
So
and it's easy.
Here's the inquiry I'm in, John. So
Okay.
I feel like my tendency is very similar from my understanding of what you just described, where I'll feel anger, and then I don't think I'm consciously trying to suppress it. I'm like, I'm going to just let it sit. I definitely know I don't want to immediately act on it. And then I'm looking for how I can go back to my ideals of loving kindness and creativity, like you said. But my inquiry is if I'm missing something by not harnessing or using that anger as an input. And so if there's some way of like not just reacting out of rote violence, but if there's some way I can take that energy and transmute it and have it be part of my action, maybe part of my loving action, maybe some other kind of action.
Well, it's the impetus. It's sort of, someone gets you angry or me angry, right? And first of all, that makes me halt whatever I'm doing. So right away that the anger has already affected sort of my process, maybe halt. That's good. Sometimes we need a halt, stop. And it's already changed. That anger's already changed my process. It's made me stop. And then and so what? And I always say it's almost like again, I'll be very vulgar. I hope this isn't offensive to your viewers, but it's like, you take it in one end, and eventually it's going to go all the way out the other end. But you have to let it go through, right? And so already the anger has made me think about, well, what is getting me angry? What was said? I live in a community where there's a lot of that, things being said, things that get you angry. And of course, this is a completely different situation about being in a situation where you're, although in a war situation, it's not anger. It's different. But this is having the luxury, right, of, okay, I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to sit and think it through. And I think what really understanding that anger it's made me think about a lot of things. Okay. Like, okay, well, what's true here? And it makes you once again become very honest. And they're the things that are true and aren't true. And then those are the things that you could go forward with, And I think that, I think the ego thing, a lot of times we get angry because, we're like, it hurts sometimes. If there's truth, and, sometimes people say things that really anger us, it's like, and sometimes we need to be detached. One time I was sitting on an airplane with this, I think I was, I don't know, 7th grade, flying to Florida or something. Johnny's going to Florida. I sat next to this rabbi. This old rabbi. He looked like, out of a film, really beautiful old guy. And we got into a conversation. And I think at that point in the 7th grade, I wanted to be a theology teacher and a coach. Wow, what a combination, They didn't specify it to the good rabbi, nor did he ask. But he did say to me, he goes, "Don't ever be married to any idea." And he was really introducing detachment, right? To be detached sometimes from conclusions or methods, and I think anger has helped me, again, going back to Jeff. And if you get back to him, tell him the guy in El Salvador, who says fuck a lot. He really appreciated his conversation with you. I really did. I thank you for it. But I think that it's led me to really understand things more clearly, define things more clearly. It's certainly sometimes anger is what brings that person into this office or into a space where, hey, let's go through this, And I think that takes a lot. And humility should be part of our list of ingredients that we need to put into our, how do we mix the red strata, the rojo, our red sauce, right? And I think humility is really an important part of that. And I think what we're seeing, in the culture now is people just stay angry. People just stay angry. They don't allow, and anger is a gift. Jeff even said, I think he said, thank God at one point in your conversation, which I found interesting. Thank God for the anger. And because it really is, I think, I know in my own case, and we've had some really tough situations here in El Salvador, like land issues, really hateful kinds of things, right now we're in this whole situation with this president, and horrible. And I know that anger, working from an anger perspective, doesn't get us anywhere. And I did think about Malcolm X, and I apologize. I'm understanding it very Malcolm 101, but allow me. But I think that Malcolm came from a lot of anger, and then of course in his he writes about that very transformational trip he made to Mecca, where he prayed with brothers, with of many colors and thoughts, and he allowed himself. He let that humility and love and solidarity transform him. And it's a shame we don't know, because anger, and I'll get emotional, at the Audubon, that they took that possibility from us, right? We never saw that in man. And maybe it has, I mean, you walk down 125th Street today, and there are all kinds of amazing work, social workers, teachers, thinkers, people doing amazing things. And I'm sure so many people have just were transformed by that, and anyway, I guess that's what I think about. I think that, we can't let the anger stop. And then I heard the last part about the idea, I think Phil Berrigan never called himself a pacifist. I think Jeff used that term. I think you did as well. And one could never call Gandhi a pacifist either.
Not accurately.
No. But Phil always called himself a nonviolent resistor.
Yeah.
Nonviolent resistor. And I think that, I think that's where these other elements could transform, or not even transform, but I think anger is part of that. I think at one time we talked about that stone soup, which has really been a metaphor of this whole project. But I think anger is part of that stone soup, right? And it's just as important as everything else, And if anger drives the bus, I think that was another term that Jeff used in your conversation with him. We can't let that drive the bus. It's a shame. It's like it's like eating escarole soup without the garlic. You're just, it's not the whole thing. It's not the whole package. To deny it would be a mistake. But I guess you were talking about this healthy integration of all these elements, right? And I think you always know someone as well. We talk about, the angry activist. I'll never forget, I won't mention names, but we all got arrested once in New York. And I didn't get arrested that day. I was visiting, and Dan Berrigan was leading a group that got arrested at the they have this the Trident. They have this, not the Trident. They have this aircraft carrier that's like a war museum in Manhattan. And they did a little action out there, and they all got arrested. And this judge, I went to the courthouse that day, and this an old school judge, old Italian judge, white guy, and he saw Dan Berrigan sitting there, and he reads over the bail. He says, with the old thick New York accent, he goes, "Is that Father Berrigan over there?" And the sheriff came over to Dan and said, "You're Father Berrigan, right?" And the judge went, "Oh," I heard him say under his breath, "Holy Christ, I don't want to mess with this guy." And he said, "The Father Berrigan, I don't want to mess with you or your people." Dismissed. And then one of the non-violent activists went into a tirade, incredible anger. You can't do that. Yeah, I have a right. I have a right to be heard in the court of law. He started calling each other's names, screaming and yelling and going off. And I'll never forget the judge telling Father Berrican, does he have to do that? And take him away. And I was overwhelmed by that sometimes that, and I've seen it in other protests where we're being carried away, and we're spitting or yelling at police or soldiers. And that's really not that integration that we talked about, nor is it peaceful, nor is it constructive.
Yeah, this is a really great distinction I just want to highlight and draw, because I think many people are not familiar with what civil disobedience is or nonviolent resistance. But the idea that you would willfully break a law, and actively resist the actions of other people. So you're like, maybe you change yourself to something or you refuse to move, and the police have to drag you away. It's very active. It's not passive. It's active resistance. But you're drawing the distinction that there's no anger there. But then there's some people, when they do it, they don't have discipline, and then they're like spitting at the police or the people dragging them away or yelling. And those are two very different, from a Gandhian perspective, those are two very different actions.
Because we're losing the focus, right? So is it more important of me making a very short-term point, letting anger sort of take that over, although it may be a very unjust situation? Or am I looking at that bigger picture where really we'll only accomplish that goal of righting a wrong, bringing justice to a very unjust situation, but only that can be accomplished by incorporating empathy, love, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, honesty, creativity, and selflessness. All of a sudden, it's not about me. It's not about me. I keep something painted over my office door, and my tradition. I come out of a Catholic Jesuit, but a very very sort of strange mix of stuff. So, but I have AMDG. It says ad maiorem Dei gloriam in Latin, for the greater glory of God. But really what it's telling me every day is none of this is about me. None of it is about me. And that keeps me sort of like, okay, there's something bigger here. There's something bigger here. The community, the people, the country, the justice, but it's not about me. And I think so often, staying in the red, talk about that strata again, right? That you and Jeff sort of created for me to understand, right? I think that very egocentric, and I think the culture is very much like this now. It's always about me. It's about my brand. It's about my image. And I've learned a long time ago, and boy, I hope to God, and I use that language mindfully, that it's never about me. And I know I came through phases of my life too, or maybe there was that one, that ego gets in the way, right? All of a sudden you think you're pretty whatever. But I think when you stay in anger, and you see this now, you see these people in the United States Congress that are very angry, and their discourses are very angry. And you know that they do that because it's part of the brand. It's part of what they're selling, and it's what people are buying. It's what people are buying, and but I think that if anger is a gift, and I'm gonna I don't know if Jeff used that term, but if anger is a gift, is just part of who we are in our humanness, right? It makes us more. To deny that, I would say I'm less human. I never get mad. If people say that, I never get mad. Bullshit, I'm not supposed to get mad, right? I get mad if they bring out the pasta and it's cold, hey, come on, what's going on, right? But I think that it's to understand it as it is, and to be able to have that sort of discipline, right? To understand it and to take it to a different level could be very, very transformational. It could be the life force, or I don't think it drives the bus. I think that combined with those other elements that require just as much discipline and mindfulness, it's all in that, what's more important, the spinach or the garlic, right?
Yeah.
They're both important, so I don't know, those are the things I was kind of thinking, and I listened to it twice. I wanted to really understand that a little bit, and yeah, but I do know that this idea of detaching from ourselves, selflessness, I think is a trait that I think is essential in leadership. And I've been in a leadership role for 40 years. Really 30 something years in leadership. But I know that, imagine if I remember I was always ese Juan Giuliano en español, dice a la gente de que ese Juan Giuliano sí es bravo. Ese gringo sí es bravo. He was the angry guy. And I think, I as a younger leader, I think I missed a lot of steps, and and the anger that was brought to me, and I'm going to use it. I'll call it a gift. Okay, I missed an opportunity. Because anger could lead us to someplace very great, combined with these other elements, right?
Yeah.
Combined with these other elements. I don't know.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, I think that's really well investigated, well stated. And I'm grateful to hear that. And I want to get your take on another part of that show, which is, so Jeff is explaining, part of what he's giving us is this developmental approach that applies both internally and socially and historically. And so at points he was talking about the warrior mindset, or the warrior stage in our evolution, and this idea of seeing everything around us as an opportunity for conflict, or like what can I fight next? And so I just wonder, because you've had these experiences that I have not had, and I think hopefully will not have, during the Civil War in El Salvador, was there any, I mean, can you relate what he was talking about to your experiences there?
It was really funny. When I first heard the podcast, one of my great mentors, although I knew him very briefly, my brother worked for him, was a Jesuit named Jack Pazziato out of New York. Boy, it'd be wonderful to get him to do a podcast. He started the nativity schools. He was down in the Lower East Side of Manhattan on Forsyth Street, during the tough years, drugs, prostitution, rough area. And he starts this school. And someone wrote this article about him as a warrior. And I think most people would reject that. Or yesterday we were in a conversation about, we have a president right now that's throwing a lot of people in jail, and brilliantly sort of campaigning on, we're cleaning up El Salvador, throwing people in jail, but in the same sense, neglecting everything else. And someone said, you're fighting against, the warrior fighting against. And I would never use that language. I'm not fighting against anything. I'm trying to construct a world because I love the people I'm with. And I think that that whole image of the warrior, and although I'm not a big Che fan, but Che always talks about this, that without love, there isn't revolution, right? I'm going to fall over there. I think that you do things out of love. And I think anger could only get you so far. That warrior mentality gets you so far. And I'm going to maintain that that the men and women that fought here, and I would never be so presumptuous to say that everyone is in the same category. I think people did things out of love to protect their families, not even themselves, because they had such great love. In the Gospel of John, it says there is no greater love than to sacrifice your own life, right? To give your life for the people you love. And I think that's how I understood the revolutionary period. I hate to use that word because the use of weapons against another force isn't really a revolution, is it? It's everything that happens after, really. It's about changing really who we are. And if everyone is doing this, well, then it's not very revolutionary, is it? Because it's what everyone else is doing. But what I saw here was that people were sacrificing their lives on behalf of others, trying to save life. And now fear is a whole nother thing. Like what happens when you're afraid, being bombed on, or shot at. I know that experience. And you're afraid and you react. We don't have in those situations, or quite often, the people didn't have moments where you're discerning something better. You're just trying to survive. There's a survival mode. Maybe that's very basic. And unfortunately, we haven't evolved from that. I mean, there are men and women that are just surviving today, under attack. Right? I remember one time during the war, we were walking, and I finally got back to this little hut where I was able to live in, and there were and our village was protected that day, and there was, and I'll use this term in quotes, because as human beings, no one is our enemy, right? But the term was always, is the enemy, is the enemigo there, I remember I just wanted to go home, honestly, and someone had given me some pasta. It's always about macaroni, man. It's always about macaroni. And I remember the helicopters came and they were strafing the village, and I remember going, fuck, it's like, there it is. Fuck it. The one afternoon I was just gonna fucking go home and eat macaroni. And I remember praying that the guys on the hill, and they were trying to shoot a 1HH-1 helicopter down with an AK-47 rifle, a number of AK-47 rifles. And I'm thinking, fuck, just shoot this bastard down, And all of a sudden I realized, how you lose your humanity, right? And I think Jeff described that warrior phase of human development. It's a very primitive one, and yet how easily it is to slip into that, right? Just take them out, But somehow we know that doesn't work, and then you realize that's why sometimes military people never make great leaders in post-war time, right? But then again, you find that people that have gone through that experience and haven't lost their humanity. I think that was an experience here in El Salvador. These people lived 12 years of war, and you think, fuck, these people must be very angry. And always be when, how about this, all those bombs, and the bombs literally, these bomb casings used to fall, and literally on the bomb, it would say, made in the USA, right? These bomb casings made in the USA, these, in the first part of the war, these M16 rifles, they're made by Colt Firearm. It's all U.S. shit. And then you'd have people from the United States would come and, people had great loss. Talk about this question of humanity, warriors that had great loss. And warriors here, who are our warriors? These were farmers. And then they were children. And those were our warriors, And then quite often there'd be delegations come down. We even had delegations come from Stanford University, a place that you know so well. The good people at Stanford, our good friend, I'll mention his name because he's such a lovely guy, and a shout out to Professor Sheehan, who loves this country, He loved our great philosopher, the Jesuit Ignacio Yacuria. But anyway, they would come in quite often. They'd want to apologize for what happened here, and our people would just look at them and go, no, please. And then they'd break bread, together, and I think that was always an overwhelming experience of North Americans that came then and even come now, that despite all this hardship, someone paid for those weapons. There it is, made in the USA, right? Obviously, they came from that source. But I mean, yeah, so you asked me about warrior, and I talk more about, humanity, right? And that's what I know. That's what I know from here. I know that people had to do horrible things. And all I know is those that, Phil Berrigan said, you can't just do a little violence, right? You can't just do a little violence. Wonderful book to read is Fighting the Lamb's War, Phil's memoir. Beautiful book. I recommend it, Unc. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. But I think here, and there were stone cold killers there too, and a lot of those people are dead now, or lost their minds, or became alcoholics, or imprisoned. But those that were able to take their pain and anguish and bring in these other elements, and that war ended in 1992, and here I am now, 2023. Is that what year we're in? I want to get my numbers right. I know you're a math guy. We're still working through that generations later. So the cost of to remain in sort of that warrior mode, or I think your conversation began, or I think your conversation with Jeff began by like people that seem to be, that's where they stay. It's put up your dukes, and I think that the warrior phase could only take you so far. There's not the warrior phase doesn't have a long shelf life. Unfortunately, it keeps being repeated in other situations. I loved Father Berrigan once wrote. He says that image of the Jesus figure. You always see him on a cross in Latin America. Like you go to U.S. churches, and Jesus looks like a surfer. He's very sort of cut and ripped and just kind of hanging there. And in Latin America, it's a very bloody, just Latin America, just like, wow, it couldn't be more. And then Dan says, the real message of that is it all stops here. The violence stops with me. From here on, this never happens again, right? That war, that violence, that suffering stops there. And then we continue from there, And of course, that's not the case, right? Men and women continue to be crucified through history and in every town and cities and all over the world, right? And right now we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young men that are being held in prisons. Yeah, some need to do their time, but injustice never corrects injustice, right? You just can't. Doesn't work that way. And we see that in El Salvador because if the president was really, really interested, it's funny, Hank, each student gets a tablet without any instruction, without any training, without any programs. And they keep slashing budgets in schools, and there's no value for teachers, and they expect society to grow beyond the warrior class. Well, we're encouraging it, right? That's what, so he's got a bigger gang. Our president has a bigger gang than their gang until someone else comes with a bigger gang than his gang, right? It's happening here. So that's all I could say about that. Like I said, and I think what makes El Salvador, and you've been here, and you would think talk about people taking that red, because at some point, the phases of anger, and revenge is part of that, right? Revenge. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you for what you did to me. But here they say, no, please sit. These very humble houses in our villages, and they break the bread and they share that tortilla, and boy, what is more human than that, right? I talk about one great warrior, if I may, and I hope this is okay. He was a U.S. general. Name is Les Fuller. Les Fuller was a U.S. general, and he was a special forces here in El Salvador. And I have all these flags I have up on one of our buildings here. And General Fuller, his daughter, who's now a member of our board, he was Holly Fuller. And he came, and I remember thinking, his first introduction to me I was like, wow, he wrote me this kind of a general's letter about having his daughter here. She was an undergraduate, and this was a guy. And then he came here. I met the most gentle, the most human, and a guy that fought with, against, for, however you want to understand that history. I'm not interested in your interpretation. All I know is that this warrior, this great warrior, general of the United States Army, was able to sit in these villages and be received by other warriors. Wow, that is, to me, that's revolutionary. I still have his flag, and I hope the termites don't eat it up as they do. And I think for me, that symbol of that flag, his gift to us, was that ultimately there is no war. What is it in English? Garcia Marquez says there's no war that lasts 100 years. Of course, there's many wars that have lasted over 100 years, but at the end, it's people. It's people that need love, that need empathy, that need compassion, forgiveness, understanding, honesty, selflessness, and humility. Wow, that's moving. That's moving to me, So that's what I see here. That's how we also now it's interesting, we're teaching the war here now. We're teaching about the war here, even in El Salvador, and we don't talk about battles. we don't talk about, we remember those things that happened. We talk about the compassion and the sacrifice and ultimately the love that those people have. And if you come someday, I really would like to invite, if I may, do a commercial for the Tamarindo. I really like to invite anyone that's listening to go to our website. This sounds really like a commercial, right?
Do it.
Allow
do
me
it.
to do it.
Yes.
Okay. Tamarinofoundation.org. And we invite you to come. And I'll walk you through, and we'll have these kinds of discussions. But even in our main building, we have the names of all the war dead, and they hang over us. They're on strings, and they float above our heads. And I wanted our young people to always be aware, remember the great sacrifice out of love, not the violence, but their love and their sacrifice and their selflessness that now allows young people to discern their own life and their own future. Start businesses, go to college, be good moms and dads, be good people to one another. To learn and to read. And this place all week long is full of people learning. We even have a building, we call it the Learning Center, which is the perfect name for it. We come here to learn. But above us, we have those names of, I guess some people may call them warriors. We call them the compañeros, companions that have made all this possible. Yeah, it's a shame they all had to go that way. And at the end, it was all negotiated anyway. That's the funny part. It's so funny. I think the whole warrior concept is so horrible that there was a movie of a number of years ago called Braveheart. I think Mel Gibson. And it was about this famous warrior in Scotland, and they have horrible battles. It's a battlefield, like in the U.S. Civil War, the same way. On the battlefield, and it's it's going off. And so many people think that's really what the whole warrior thing's about, and it all ends that way, like a football game. And then you go home, and you wash off, and you win or lose, but it's not that way at all. Ever. It's ever that way. And like I said, here we are. 31 years later, and we're still working through it. We're still working through this stuff, and thank God. I don't know what's going to happen next in this new kind of war. And the way we use that language, warrior for God, warrior for peace, warrior. Fuck that. Warrior nothing. It's like no, we're not. We're not being warriors. Father Pazziato's not a warrior. The guy that started that nativity school, he's a guy that was humility, through his humility and sacrifice and knowledge. And I think what we're supposed to do is give of our gifts, right? That's what we're supposed to do. So anyway. Yeah, no, thank you, Ankh. I appreciate it. I'm not sure if I'm adding to the conversation at all, but I thank you and Jeff, because you made me go back and think about sort of my own process with anger, and the one that I feel, the one that I had the most difficult time with is the anger I have about myself, my self anger, right? The things that I think both of you said you're working through things, and I think you said we're going to keep running experiments. I would never ever say that ever, but now that you've said it, I feel like I have license to borrow it, and I'm going to continue my experiment. But I do know that what I the result that I seek and I hope is I continue to less me, less me, less me, less me, less me, selflessness to poof.
Hi everyone, this is Martin San, producer, editor, and sound designer for the 10,000 Heroes Joe. I just wanted to take a minute to thank our guest for joining us, and also thank you for listening. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. This is the team. Pierre does our artwork, DJ Plainview composed our theme music, and I handle all the editing and sound design. And now, we are closing down this episode with a word from our main sponsor, who also happens to be our host, Anchor.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening. If you like this episode, there's two things I want you to do. One, introduce me to the most inspiring person you know so I can have them on the show. And two, take the next step towards us hanging out in person. Maybe that's signing up for the newsletter. Maybe that's attending an upcoming in-person or virtual event. But either way, the whole point, what I'm trying to do here is disrupt and destroy the one-to-many nature of this medium, podcast, or entertainment in general, and replace it with nurturing the seeds of the beloved community of love, one conversation at a time. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay.
Bye.